Ezekwesili. You've just heard the 5 p.m. news update. You know it's time for the big hard fact. And that means that from now until 6, we're diving deep into one big issue in Nigeria today. And for the rest of the year, each day on the big hard fact, we're going to be reviewing the big highlights of the year in the quest to give us light. Now, here's today's big hard fact. According to the CIA's World Fact Book, Nigeria ranks 192nd in the world for energy consumption per person at 128 kilowatt hours per capita. That's a big number. Well, rather, that's a small number. It means that a man or woman living in Nigeria will see light in a year, less light in a year than a man or woman in 191 other countries. You want to know what some of those other countries are? Syria. War-torn Syria. They have over 1,000 kilowatt hours per capita. That's over 8 times Nigeria's average. So that's the context, And for the rest of the hour, we're going to look at the big events that took place in the power sector for this year. We'll look at their causes. We'll look at their implications. We'll try and get a general idea about whether or not this was a good year for the power sector in Nigeria. Now, we're not going to be talking up. I always say that. We're not going to talk up here. I want to bring this home to you. I want to make sure that you understand what we're talking about and you can contribute as well. So how was your year in electricity? Did you have more light than last year or less? Do you have a prepaid meter now? Did you get your prepaid meter this year? And throughout the show, I'm also going to be asking you questions about the topics that come up. And helping me have this conversation are my guests who are experts on power. I have Oboh, who is on the show with us, joining us on the phone. He's a power expert. He's been in the power sector for a very long time. Mr. Oboh, thank you so much for joining us.
Hello, Sandra. How are you doing?
Very well. And I also have on the show with me Timi Sholaye, who is with Cryo Gas and Power. And he's been on the show once before, and it's great to have him back today. Hi, Timi. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me again.
Okay, all right. Now that we've done all the setup, I want to start with output. And I'm going to start with you, Ayo. I want to start with the power that my listener is getting or not getting at home before we move on to policy, right? So let me start with grid collapse. We witnessed, Tim is laughing. We witnessed almost a dozen grid collapses this year, and they brought total blackout nationwide. Can you educate us on what grid collapse is and what causes it?
Okay, so we have a national grid, which is a network of high voltage transmission lines that connect various generating plants across the country with what are called substations across the country also that are owned by distribution companies. So imagine your national grid as a water works, right? You have a large pool of water that is filtered and then sent out across huge pipes, all right, across the state or across the country into smaller pipes that lead into your home. That network of huge pipes is the national grid.
I see.
And the smaller network of pipes which lead into your home are the networks that are owned by your local water companies across the state. Right? So imagine it that way. And so that's what it is. Now, if for any reason there is a disturbance on the grid, and those disturbances are usually caused by imbalances either in frequency or in the voltage that is delivered into the grid, it generally leads to a collapse. Now, why do we have these collapses? Because the national grid itself is difficult to isolate, and that's not an issue of control. All right. Over the years, there hasn't been the right kind of investment that you have expected in the control of the grid, and so if, for example, for any reason, one generating plant goes down somewhere, for whatever reason, and these are machines, so it could happen, right? You can't isolate that problem from the grid. It generally affects the grid. And as a general rule, that's really what your national grid collapses are about.
I wonder if you think he left anything out to me.
Well, okay. I remember a few years ago going to the Center for the National Grid operation is in Oshogbo.
Okay.
And I remember going there, and I walked into a room where they were controlling the national grid, and it was four gentlemen, each of whom had 2 mobile phones, some of which they had rubber bands around them, controlling them.
Okay.
And that's how they were controlling our national grid. They had a paper map up on the wall with pins in it.
Okay.
And so someone would call, being like, Egbin STM 45 is down. Then they would run around, and then they would try and get to call someone else to be like, let's balance the grid again. And because they were bad network, etc., the entire country doesn't have power. The extent to which the grid has been underinvested in, and that transmission is a huge problem in Nigeria, is I don't think it can be overstated. So I mean, it means that even when people talk about plans for power, the improvement of power supply through the grid in Nigeria, they just brought out a tariff review, etc. But in January, this coming January, we're going to see when they say what their projections for the reinvestment in TCN are, and I don't know what you can do with this grid, honestly. And I can sometimes be a little radical about my idea that the grid is dead, but sometimes I look at it and it's like this 1992 Camry that you keep trying to fix. You say you're going to change the brake fluid. You say that there's an investment plan. You say that you've talked to Toyota. Toyota have stopped making this car and spare parts for this car since I was a toddler.
Okay.
So this idea, it's like the refineries are kind of the same thing, which is you're trying to use ancient technology in 2019. I just don't know what the actual potential solution is.
Okay. All right. Ayo, we seem to have had far more grid collapses this year than in the previous years. Why is the grid collapsing more frequently?
Honestly, I'm not sure about that. So you have to, I haven't looked at the numbers, but up to 2015 or 16, there was actually a steady reduction. There shouldn't be a collapse in the grid. Look, if you go to any well-run grid anywhere in the world and you say to them, a grid collapse is the equivalent in a human being of a heart attack.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
It shouldn't happen.
Okay.
And if it happens, your chances of survival are very slim unless you have good care. So for us to have these repeated heart attacks is really, and survive them is actually kind of a miracle. Every time a grid collapses, getting it up is such a tough job. And it takes its toll on every single machine that is connected to the grid, the generating machine that is connected to the grid. So their shelf lives are reduced every time there's a collapse. Now, so we're really not talking about the normal situation here. We shouldn't be discussing grid collapses. I've been to a company called PJM. PJM is the system operator for the northeastern part of the United States and a little part of Canada. They move 165,000. Well, they have 165 to 170,000 megawatts, and they move around 110 of that on a daily basis. And I asked a guy who had been there since this was in 2013 or 12. I asked my first visit there. I asked the guy who had been there since 1965, how many grid collapses have you seen? He said, what's a grid collapse? And when I explained to him, he said, well, they've seen a brownout. And the last time he saw that was in 1969. Right? He hadn't seen one since then. Okay, they keep the grid going. And that's, as Timmy has tried to point out to you, it's a question of the control of the grid. So, it's abnormal talking about, we had 10 this year, and last year we had 9. So we should be having 7 or 6 this year. It just would not happen. And it is happening because we do not have a grid that is composed of a number of islands. We have one single national grid.
Of which they have not closed the loops, right?
So there's no balance, all right? It is radial. It's not looped in such a way that you can close off a part of it and isolate it from the rest if that part is any kind of problem. So really what we should be talking about is, to my mind, how do we ensure that the 11 distribution companies across the country are served by their own regional transmission organizations that focus on those particular distribution company or companies that are within that area.
See, but you've touched on the third rail, which is this idea.
If I can just finish, and then we can continue.
All right, go ahead.
Really, I don't want to discuss. We had 9 this year, and so we should have 7 or 6 or 5 next year. No, we shouldn't have any. All right,
okay.
And it's simple investment that we should be talking about here. How much do we need to spend into ensuring that distribution companies get what they need and can move that energy that they need to the customers that want it in a way that is safe and efficient.
Okay.
And it cannot be done by a national grid, as far as I'm concerned.
All right, let me hear what Timmy has to say.
Well, I mean, you point out something, which is that we had 3 grid collapses, total grid collapses in January alone this year. Like, I think it's the 5th of January, the 19th of January, the 26th of January, and then we had a partial grid collapse on the 28th. I mean, that's remarkable. But the truth is, like, yes, we shouldn't have grid collapses, and islands are the solution. But the actual truth is, like, how do you get, like, I hate to transition into policy, but how do you get there if you insist upon this idea of this centralized national grid, and importantly, if this centralized national grid is not able to charge sufficient amounts for investment and to recover the investment and to invest, then I don't know, like, there's no solution to there's no solution to this problem in the current regime.
Okay.
Like, TCN doesn't work and it's not going to work. We live in a country where heart attacks are common and will continue to be so, even though it seems completely senseless. But like, our power problems aren't going anywhere. And it seems as if they're being exacerbated, and I can't see what is going to change.
It's interesting you bring up TCN. In the past, the Transmission Company of Nigeria blamed grid collapse on, and other routine power failures on the discos, right? They say that the discos haven't upgraded their distribution networks to receive power at the right frequency, and that the networks often reject loads when it rains. And then the discos have, of course, denied all of this. They've blamed the TCN, So I wonder how big of a problem is a distribution network to me.
So distribution is a big problem. When you talk about load rejection, right, there are technical reasons for it.
Okay.
But then there are also, and I always come back to this, financial reasons, which is that if you ask the disco to pay for electricity that it can't then deliver on, what they started to do was they started to reject it because I'm an egg seller. You're delivering me, 40 crates of eggs. I know that 20 of those crates are either going to arrive at the customers with half the eggs smashed or half the customers won't pay. After a while, but you are trying to hold me for the full money. After a while, I'm just going to say to myself, well, you know what? Only deliver me 15. Of course, this creates a big problem down in your own value chain and your delivery because they're not supposed to be going back with only half of the eggs delivered. But like on the disco side, I'm not a big fan of discos, but I find it very difficult to blame them for rejecting load.
Okay.
And when they reject load, because the grid is not properly balanced, right, you do end up with these system collapses.
I wonder if you agree with that, Ayo. Hello, Ayo.
Yeah, I'm here.
All right.
I don't know. 1 hour is not going to be enough for a discussion on policy, like Timmy has said, what really is implicated. I certainly don't agree that there is no solution. There was a solution. it's a human problem, it's an engineering problem, or an engineering problem, financial problem that come from a human problem. And human problem is simply a lack of a clear-cut direction in terms of policy and in terms of regulation. So there is a solution. The question is whether there's a political will to execute, first to identify the problem, work on the solution to it, and then execute the solution to that problem. So there is, and that's really what it comes down to, the will to deal with the problem that stares us all in the face. So maybe when we get to that point where there is a total collapse in the energy sector,
we'll finally sort it out. Because, Ayo, the most recent collapse was caused by the nationwide strike by the National Union of Electricity Employees, NUE. And I want us to talk about that strike for a bit. They had multiple grievances. First was that employees of discos have not been receiving full salaries, and the discos have also not been making the proper contributions to their pension funds, right? Which regulator is responsible for making sure the discos pay their workers? I'm asking you, especially Ayo, because you worked with NEC and you were also on the presidential team for power reforms, right? So who is responsible? Which regulator is responsible for making sure the discos pay their workers, and why hasn't it been happening?
Well, look, a trade union exists to ensure that the working conditions of its members are at the best available. All right, that's the sole reason, indeed the only reason why a trade union exists. However, in the power sector, there is also a situation where you have electricity as an essential service. Right? So you go on strike, and the entire country suffers because discos, according to one of the reasons given, is that our members are not being properly paid. It implicates how are the discos being run. Okay, and the members of this union are the ones who work in the discos. We can begin to analyze the many ills of the distribution companies, but it will always come down to the way in which they are run. All right. I'm not here saying that I'm against the discos. There's no regulator that will say to a disco, don't pay your workers. Why are the workers not being well paid? Because they are not collecting even the tariffs that are supposedly low, which they are entitled to collect. Why are they not collecting those tariffs? So the questions go on and on and on, but it comes down to the way in which the discos are being run. I don't think, if that is the reason why, this justifies a nationwide strike, all right, by the NUEE. That's not what you exist for, to inconvenience the entire country because your workers are not being well paid. So
yeah, but Ayo, before the strike, NUEE gave a 21-day ultimatum. 21. Nobody responded to them. Nobody responded to them. They went on strike. 1 day later, government came to beg them and give assurances, and they lifted the strike.
Sandra, you give an ultimatum because you want a certain thing to occur. What was the event that the NUE? I don't know. I haven't followed. Yeah, look, I need to disclose something here. Personally, my experience with the NUE has been a very close one.
Okay.
I know the people who run the NUE.
Okay.
And it's not the workers. They don't run their trade union. It's run by hired guns who are not actually workers. They are paid to actually be the leaders, the management, not the leadership, the management of the NUE. And I know that they have not always acted even in the best interest of the workers. So I'm a bit biased here. I really want to understand why the leadership or the management of the NUE decided to call a strike.
Okay.
And why they then called it off.
Let me see if Timmy has the answers. Timmy?
So, I mean, I guess the first thing that I'll say is the idea of electricity as an essential service in Nigeria is... This is not this is just my opinion, but it's ludicrous. People, about 40% of the country has no connection whatsoever to electricity. They're still alive, they're people, so clearly it's not essential. Anyone who lives in Nigeria, actually lives in Nigeria, knows that electricity can't be essential, because if it was essential, we would all be dead, right? So, like, so that's actually my first. That's my first thing. And then yes, I do agree that the discos are incompetently run. But then when you look at the way that money flows in the electricity sector, the discos are collecting, say, 28% of what they're supposed to be collecting. Air quotes.
Okay.
So I think what they tend to do is they tend to pay their. Of course, the management pays themselves first. But that's just Nigeria and life and anyhowness. But then after that, then they say that, okay, well, because they remit to MBET the share of what they're supposed to collect that they get. So they say, okay, well, we're getting paid 28%. And that's the market collections. So we'll remit that to MBET and we'll pay you 28%. I'm just giving kind of the disco line, right? Which is like, I can only pay you as much as I'm getting paid. As much as you are due of the share that I'm getting paid. So you have to ask yourself, well, where is the fundamental issue that like, I don't see how, like, I always use this statistic, which is like, power lands at, a very fancy house on Walter Carrington here in VI, that in the richest part of the country in Echo Disco at 30 Naira and 29 kobo, but leaves Azura Power Plant in Edo at $10.50, which is 37 Naira. How are you supposed to square that? There's no if I was running a business, there's no management I can do that means that the person who supplies me is buying the thing at 6 Naira more than I am allowed to sell it. I just don't see how you get through like, I don't think you bring the most brilliant CEO in the world and they could actually manage that situation. Like, you don't manage your way out of that. Not in what is functionally a heavily regulated utility business.
Now, one of the complaints that they had, and to be honest, I feel like if we stayed on NUEE, we're probably going to spend the whole hour talking about NUEE, and we're going to get to MAP next. But one of the complaints that NUEE had was that the DISCOs, GENCOs, and TCN haven't paid off the former workers of PHCN who were laid off during the privatization process. When I add these complaints to the complaint about salaries and pensions, it paints the picture of an industry with cash constraints. Ayo, are the DISCOs and GENCOs going broke? And if you say they are, why are they?
Well, it's not true that the successor companies, the generating companies, the distribution companies of TCN has a responsibility to pay the severance benefits of NUE workers. That's the federal government's responsibility. So let's go back. One of the bases on which the privatization was concluded and these successor companies handed over to their new owners was that, and this was at the insistence of the NUE, that the contract of the government workers, which is what they were at the time, would be terminated. They would be paid severance benefits, and then new contracts of employment with these now privately owned companies would start on the day of privatization and takeover, which was the 1st of November 2013. And that was done. Most Nigerians do not know that practically the entire process of the privatization, somewhere around a few $billion, were paid to the workers. Right. Even fewer are aware that the NUEE took 10% of that money. Right? And so I don't understand how 6 years later we now hear that certain people were not paid. Who are these people? Where are they? I know that the biometrically managed verification process was carried on by the BPE. All right?
Okay.
And staff were verified. Of course, there were complaints that so and so people were left out. Particularly, I believe, in the generating companies. All right. I also know for a fact that those few people, all right, who were not paid at the time in 2013, were then gradually verified. What I cannot say now, and I hope the BP will clarify this, is what eventually happened to those people. Certainly, there are a lot fewer than they're a lot fewer than even probably 5% of the 49 or so thousand workers that were in the successor companies at the time in 2013, and they were all paid. I mean, people got sums as high as 90 million, 100 million, 70 million, 30 million, 40. So who are these people? Let's know them. And is it because of this relatively very small number of people that you now bring down the entire grid? I don't think there's a proportionality in this. So NUE and its management or its leadership needs to come clean, right, about what actually happened. And, this is one of the reasons why we have this challenge, because in any civilized society, you take 3 billion in selling 60% of your business, that money should be reinvested in the business. It never was. It went to the workers. The same workers who are still there, by the way, because they then got contracts the following day. All right, after they had been severed from their government employment, they now became employees of new private companies, and they're still there. So we can actually be emotive about these issues, but I think we need to be factual first before, and people need to come clean about what has happened.
Okay.
There's a bit of disinformation here.
Okay.
And I think the federal government needs to actually ask the BP what actually happened to these people.
Okay.
They can approach the NE with the facts in their hands.
All right.
With facts, and it's actually not disclosing quite a number of very, very material facts that people of Nigeria need to know about. One of which is that they've actually been paid off.
Okay. By the way, if you are a current or former worker in any of the electricity companies, please call us and tell us if you're being owed salary, if you're being owed pension, if you're being owed severance or any other payment. Our numbers are 01277 0993, 01277 1993, 01277 2993, and 01277 3993. We're going to take a quick break. We'll come back and continue this conversation. If you just joined us, we're reviewing the year and we're talking about power. On the show with me are power experts. The first one's from Cryo Gas and Power. His name is Timi Sholeye. And the second one used to be a commissioner at NEC. He's worked with General Electric. He's worked with the Presidential Task Force on Power. And he is currently the director, New Frontiers Development Limited. His name is Oboh. And he's going to be right here after this break. I'm Sandra Ezekwesili. You're listening to 99.3 Nigeria Info. This is Hard Facts.
Hard Facts. We'll be right back.
This is Hard Facts.
Hello, Lagos. Here we are on Hard Facts discussing the power sector because every single day for the rest of the year on Hard Facts, we're on the Big Hard Facts specifically, we're going to be reviewing the year for a single topic or issue. And today's topic is power. So we're looking at the big highlights of the year in the quest to give us light. According to the CIA's World Fact Book, I mentioned this when I started, Nigeria ranks 192nd in the world for energy consumption per person at 128 kilowatt hours per capita. Now, NERC this year kicked off the Meter Asset Provider Program or MAP program. So basically, they are contracting a new set of companies to supply us with prepaid meters. Wasn't this supposed to be the disco's job? Why do they need to give it to somebody else? The people I'm asking these questions are power experts on the show. We have Ayo, who is a huge player in the power industry, the power sector. He was with General Electric. He was a commissioner at NERC. He was also on the Presidential Task Force on Power. He's doing his own business now. And I also have a representative from Cryo Gas and Power, Timi Sholeye. So, Ayo, tell me, wasn't this supposed to be the job of the discos? Why do they need to give it to somebody else?
Your guess is as good as mine. I don't know why. You might as well just take the entire disco business and hand it to other people. So I really cannot explain or justify this. You're simply adding yet another cost. Now, I'm a lawyer, so I would tend to start from what the law says. The law says that discos are meant to be run efficiently, and NERC is supposed to ensure that this happens. So, in other words, customers are not compelled to pay more than they should, particularly as the discos themselves are monopolies. So, when you introduce what is effectively a middleman into the energy value chain between generation, transmission, distribution, and the customer via this meter asset provision thing, then you are introducing a cost. So I wish NERC, I don't know if your research had uncovered anything from NERC that explained how this improves either the quality of service to the customer or the cost of service to the customer. I haven't seen any.
I haven't seen any.
That it does. It's not so much a challenge as to who provides the meters. We all know who should provide the meters. It should be the disco. It's to how efficiently can meters be provided to discos. And in practice, I really do not know what value the meter asset provision framework has really brought, what benefit it has brought. It hasn't. Nobody has given us statistics saying that the number of unmetered customers has been reduced by so much, or that the number of prepaid meters has been increased by so much. We haven't seen that. It's been on for about 6-7 months, perhaps even close to a year now.
April 2018.
So it's actually getting on to a year since this year started, and I don't know what benefits we have derived from it. I do know from personal experience that it hasn't brought any. If my personal experience is anything to go by, 3 discos have asked to provide meters to 6 or 7 different people. Not one of them has a meter yet. And this is the most recent was about 2 months ago. Right. So I don't know what the benefits are, but I haven't seen them.
So to me, the discos are having difficulties paying salaries. They're having difficulties paying pensions. They're having difficulties upgrading their networks. They're having difficulties supplying meters. Why are the discos having difficulties being discos? I mean, do they lack the capacity to, and maybe the capital for their job?
Well, so, I mean, I can talk about one particular disco, for instance, right?
okay.
So if you think about it, I can't, disclose which, but, okay, let me talk about a disco in abstract. Actually, let me talk about one that was well prepared and one that wasn't.
Okay.
One that was poorly prepared. It was, a politically prominent backer
Okay.
behind the bid.
Okay.
So they won the bid even though they weren't really in my opinion, qualified to do so.
Okay.
And so when you look at the money that they put down for it, when you actually look down into the books, yes, it says like, okay, they borrowed from the bank 60% of the money, in fact 70% of the money, and then they put in 30% of their own money, that's the equity that's supposed to be a show of faith. Like, look, I'm putting my own actual earned money down. When you actually dig down into that 30% quote unquote equity, you actually find out that it's actually just more borrowed money. So they borrowed the money, so when you look at the debt burdens that were on many of these companies, and certainly the worst prepared on them from the start, they thought that these things were like telecoms licenses, where it would be a license to print money, etc. And not many of them did not, I think, when they went into it, properly consider what businesses that they were actually going into, how capital intensive these businesses were, how you needed long-term capital, how functionally the fact that you are not able to set the prices yourself, even though there was a method which the government reneged on that was supposed to set the prices, like they just weren't prepared. And then when you realize that, yes, it's faults on both sides, because even when I think about one disco owner who was very well prepared, they raised money from a multilateral finance institution, like a very prominent and prestigious one. They raised equity, they put it in, they had a plan. They have still not been able to make it work. So you realize that the discos were generally ill prepared for the situation that they had. And they also, because of the way the contracts were written, if they decided to return the discos back to the government, the government was supposed to basically pay them 2 or 3 times what they had bought it for. So in the end, that's why a lot of them plunged in, because it was like, even if this thing doesn't work, it's the double my money scheme, right? So, when you look at it, many of the seeds, and I always point out that we're kind of seeing it now with the idea of willing buyer, willing seller. The mistake that was made, in my opinion, was this carving up the electricity sector into these private monopolies. They should have deregulated the sector. Mr. Lagbaja can sell power to Mrs. Ezekwesili, no problem. As opposed to saying who you must now buy power from. And giving you no option to judge, is that a competent person to be in charge of supplying electricity to my house and my home? It's like the telecom sector, Nitel. Who cares about Nitel? Who cares what Nitel is doing? Who cares? You don't mind.
Because it's been democratized.
And it has been, the sector has been liberalized. And that actually, I think, is the biggest problem that has shot even the people who invested in the discos in the foot. And, when we talk about the meter asset provider, so now, because it's all a lot of jargon, right? So you have Genco, Disco, gas DSO supplier. So now we have the MAPs. All those people I talked about, the Gencos, the Discos, the gas suppliers, have not been getting paid. So you add another layer of people to not get paid, so that, in 2 years we have MAPs cry, woes, threaten, etc., etc. It will be the same cover that you just, it's just like now we've added another cast of characters.
It's interesting you brought up willing buyer, willing seller. The NERC allowed discos to charge higher tariffs for more reliable 247 power to customers that are ready to pay, right? We reported this year how it had been brought to Ikeja, for example. Many people I spoke to at the time, though, were worried that under willing buyer, willing seller, all the richer consumers will be provided for because they can pay, and the poorer ones will be neglected. Do you think this is a legitimate concern? And are there, mechanisms in place to prevent this?
Okay, let me go back a little bit to what
Timmy said.
It's not quite correct to say that monopolies were sold. No. Or anybody was. No disco has a monopoly of anything.
Okay.
Whether in terms of the law, in terms of their licenses. Anyone who can actually build a distribution network. The question, of course, is that it's very difficult to build a distribution network over and above an existing one, simply because nobody wants the inconvenience of having poles being dug into their backyards, land being acquired to build more substations and all that. So distribution is what economists would call a natural monopoly. That's why they have to be regulated, because it's the only way to stimulate some form of competition. Now, I don't want to go into the dialectic or the philosophical foundations or economic foundations of why you have these things as near natural monopolies. But the reality, of course, is that when they were privatized, and we have seen that because particularly in Lagos, we have lots of private suppliers of electricity, particularly to estates, right? It's not been done by Core Ikeja Disco. They're basically cannibalizing and taking away the lunch that these discos expected to have. So it's just a question of, if you don't provide the service, someone else will. Particularly in the southwest and perhaps in the southeast, where you have people who are financially or commercially more capable of engaging in contracts or entering into contracts for their own private power supply. So that's the point that I think needs to be made. Now, to your question, I believe, which is asking, and please correct me if I'm wrong. I wasn't quite following, but I think what the question seeks to address is
the people who are worried that the richer people will be prioritized and the poorer ones will be neglected. Do you think that's a legitimate concern? Are there mechanisms that could prevent that?
It is a legitimate concern.
Okay.
Anyone that wants to be served should be served. The question is that customers are served at different cost levels. And so what you have invariably, like it happened in the telecoms business in the early days, we seem to have forgotten that, is that the richer customers will be served first. Networks will be built out to serve them first before you get to the less well-heeled areas across the country. That's a fact of economics. So what regulation tries to do to temper that a little bit is to place a demand or an obligation on distribution companies to serve all customers the same level, right? To connect all customers once they demand a connection to be made, which is why whoever wants a meter will get a meter. You might get a different kind of meter, but you certainly get a meter. All right. You might get a meter different from your neighbor, but you certainly get a meter. So to keep it simple, the discos do have that obligation, and I don't think the real challenge is with poorer or richer customers. Discos just prefer not to meter their customers because it's easier to get more money out of them via estimates. All right. So estimated billing is actually what quite a number of the discos use to try to close the gaps in their collection rates.
Yeah.
It's a lot easier to collect, and to collect. Apparently, it's a lot easier to collect money from a customer who is not being metered.
Timmy's face says he doesn't quite agree.
More from that customer than from one who is metered and who can then manage his consumption.
Timmy, you don't agree?
So, the first thing is, like, yes, you're right that the law maybe leaves ambiguous whether these are monopolies or not, but you shall need a distribution license if you want to start a competing distribution company. And that is the barrier, not the extra poles in your backyard. Because if you tell me I'll have lights, but you put an extra pole in my backyard, I will agree. But you have to go to NERC to get the license. And NERC had been captured by the discos. It's called regulatory capture. So if you go to the NERC official and say, I want to build this here, he knows that he's getting a Christmas hamper from Mr. Lagbaja and blah, blah disco, and he's not going to let you. And that's the problem with the structure of the law, which it leaves it too much at the discretion of the regulator. And I mean, I guess, like, my next thing is that, in a sense, I'm going to be frank. Yes, richer people will get power first. But here's the thing, and this is the point you make about willing buyer, willing seller. There's an excellent test case for this already that just happened with no fanfare in an ad hoc way. If you live in Banana Island, you know that you don't really use your generator. This is because the BIPORAL, the Banana Island Residents Association, 5 years ago went to the disco and agreed to pay a higher rate so that they would get a tap straight from Alagbon to Banana Island. So what that means is, let's say that there's in that disco that there's supposed to be 400 megawatts, right? If there are 7 megawatts in that and Banana Island's demand is 6, they give them the 6 first and share the 1 with everybody else. This is just straight up economics because they pay on time, they're all metered. You can't use your residency pass stops working if you don't pay your bills. So, of course, the disco has been for a long time incentivized to provide them with primary power, which is why you look at, I remember, there was 1 month in 1 September where they had 99% uptime in Banana Island. Like, they're not just paying for the good roads, they get power and they pay for it. This is the actual truth. And this is how you need to structure systems. In Nigeria, power is not yet a utility.
Yeah, but
we talk about essential systems, etc. If it was essential, would we not have it? And so you have to say, okay, well, the pricing is an issue and the people who are willing to pay is an issue. But that's what happens when you let the market determine. Because, for instance, just because Mike Adenuga can buy a Heineken does not mean I can't buy one. If he has 120 naira and I have 120 naira, we can both buy beer. It doesn't price, like when you put up an essential, like a operating market system, it doesn't actually price the poorest out of it. Of course it does. There will be an initial shock, no question about it. But a lot of these people are generating power for themselves, are creating alternate systems. And the actual truth is, like, that's the only way that you're going to get enough power to sell, not just to the Adenugas, but to me and you and, my cook and my driver and my employees too. It's really the only way. The actual truth is, like, we need to get rid of this idea that electricity is because we don't have it, as you can see, is somehow some sort of God-given right. It's a thing that you need to think, budget for, ration for, and that has cost implications that mean that there is a flaw.
I can hear Nigerians who disagree with you right now.
So here's my thing. Okay, so do they have light in their houses?
No.
Actually, they do. Look, they do. Let's how many bipolar?
Well, I haven't had light in my house for 2 days, so.
All right. So, you haven't had public power supply, but I'm sure you have a generator, and so that's the.
No, we're not talking generators now, Ayo.
No. You have to. We tend to say that we have only 4,000 megawatts. Remember when I was on the program the last time? I said we don't have 4,000 megawatts. We have a multiple of that. Somewhere closer to 60 or 70.
Yes.
Right? The question, of course, is that we are all NEPA, which is not the way to run about to manage an economy or even manage the power supply system. The question is, how do you then convert those alternative sources into public power supply? And it's not by going the bipolar way, because we are not all bipolar. We don't all live in Banana Island. Like that. The majority of Nigerians live in places that are less wealthy, or much less wealthy than in Banana Island. So there has to be some kind of method that is found. I think that this is my view from what I've seen. The challenge that we have in the electricity market today is one of trust and credibility, and that is a policy and a regulatory problem. Regulators and policymakers have not continued as they did at the beginning to try and provide an environment in which the kind of funding that we need to exponentially grow our market at a really rapid rate at which it needs to grow, at which we need to convert our generators from being things that serve only us to being that are part of the network, and actually then discard those generators and we depend more on a public supply. It didn't happen, or it has stopped happening. And that's because a number of policy errors, regulatory errors have been made or were made in the past that have continued and have then broken that trust. Now, why is it that distribution companies are paying a lot less up to NZ now than the same companies under the same management were paying earlier? Not just because of low tariffs, it's because they don't see why they should pay more. All right? So the question is, how much are they actually collecting? It's not 28%. They lost more than 28%. What is happening to the difference between 28% and whatever it is they collect? Are they paying their bankers for their acquisition loans? Are they paying themselves dividends? Are they salting the money away via all kinds of contracts which are not quite at arm's length or properly procured? The question that I think NEC should ask, but NEC is not asking. Or at least NEC hasn't started to ask yet. And Until we do that, until we actually ask ourselves why discos are behaving in the way that they behave now, which is with a lot less reliance in the credibility of their regulators and their policymakers, and therefore with a lot less desire to pay for services that are provided to them by TCN or by the generating companies. Until we actually answer that question, we're going to run around preferring solutions that are not holistic
and not viable,
and are not focused on dealing with what is actually a national problem. So we can solve the problem in Lagos, and we will. It will be solved. Lagos is actually a commercial center. They will always solve that problem in some way that makes sense for them in Lagos, but we will not solve the national problem. So I'm not saying that what's happening in Lagos is wrong or is bad. It's good. But look, are we discussing Lagos or are we discussing Nigeria?
Fair question. All right.